We humans love stories. We tell stories about who we are, where we come from, and what makes us special. Many of these stories are about our ancestors. People often imagine a direct, unbroken line stretching back through time, connecting them to a single place and a single pure group. They might say, "My people have always lived in this valley," or "My bloodline has never mixed with others." It's a powerful idea, one that can create a strong sense of identity and belonging. These stories feel true, passed down from generation to generation like precious heirlooms. But what if these comforting tales are just that, tales? What if science could read a different kind of history, one written not in books but inside our very cells? In the last few years, a revolution in genetics has allowed us to do exactly that. Scientists can now look at the DNA from people who lived thousands of years ago. This ancient DNA is like a message in a bottle, washed ashore from the deep ocean of time. And the message it carries is clear and surprising. The idea of a pure bloodline is a myth. Our history is not a straight line. It's a wonderfully messy web. The truth revealed by science is that no group has ever been truly isolated. The story of humanity is a story of constant motion. People have always been on the move, walking across continents, sailing over seas, meeting new groups and mixing with them. Imagine pouring different colored sands into a jar and shaking it. Over thousands of years, that is what our species has done. The beautiful, blended patterns we see are the result of countless migrations, replacements, and unions. Your DNA is not a record of one single color, but a mosaic of many. This scientific revelation challenges some of our most deeply held beliefs. It tells us that the concept of us versus them is often based on a false understanding of the past. The people you might think of as separate or different from your own ancestors may very well be your ancestors too. Harvard geneticist David Reich, a pioneer in this field, recently confirmed on September 18, 2025, that this constant mixing is the rule, not the exception, for every population on Earth. Our history is far more interconnected and shared than any of our old stories ever imagined. For a long time, our knowledge of the deep past came from clues left behind in the dirt. Archaeologists would find pottery, tools, and the bones of our ancestors. These objects told us a lot about how people lived, what they ate, and how they died. But they couldn't tell us who those people were related to, or where their grandparents came from. The bones were silent on the matter of their genetic story. They held the book of their history, but we didn't have the key to unlock it and read the words written inside. It was a story trapped in the very molecules of life. Then everything changed. Thanks to incredible new technology, scientists like Svante Pääbo and David Reich figured out how to carefully extract and read the tiny, fragmented pieces of DNA left in ancient bones and teeth. Think of it like finding a book that has been shredded into millions of pieces, and then painstakingly putting it back together, page by page. This process allows us to read the genetic code of individuals who lived tens of thousands of years ago. It's like having a time machine that lets us meet our ancestors and ask them, who were your people? This field of study called ancient DNA analysis has exploded over the last decade. David Reich's lab alone has analyzed the genomes of over 16,000 ancient individuals, creating a massive library of human history. This isn't just a small peek into the past, it's like opening the floodgates of information. We are learning things that were once considered unknowable. We can now trace the epic journeys of entire populations as they moved across the globe, and we can see exactly when and where different groups met and had children together, mixing their DNA forever. The results have been stunning, and they are rewriting our history books in real time. We are finding that major historical events, like the spread of farming or languages, were often driven by huge migrations of people. Sometimes these new arrivals almost completely replaced the people who were there before. These discoveries show us a past that was far more dynamic and turbulent than we ever knew. The silent bones are finally speaking, and they are telling us a story of a single, sprawling, interconnected human family. If you could watch a time-lapse video of human history spanning the last 50,000 years, you wouldn't see stable populations rooted in one place. Instead, you would see a swirling, chaotic dance of people spreading across the planet. The idea that your ancestors lived in the same place you do now for thousands of years is almost certainly wrong. Ancient DNA proves that nearly every region on Earth has been home to different groups of people at different times. The story of humanity is one of replacement and mixing over and over again. It is a great human remix. Let's look at Africa, the continent where our species was born. You might think this would be the one place with stable, ancient populations. But the DNA tells a different story. For example, research shows that the people living in Cameroon between 3,000 and 8,000 years ago were a completely different group from the Bantu-speaking peoples associated with the region today. The original inhabitants were replaced by newcomers. This pattern of movement and displacement happened all across the continent. Africa is not a static museum of human origins. It has always been a dynamic place of migration and change. Now let's travel to Asia and the Pacific Islands. The genetic story here is just as complex. The DNA of people in East Asia and Oceania contains evidence of incredible journeys and mixing events. For instance, many people in this region carry genetic markers from an ancient human group called the Denisovans. This shows that as our modern human ancestors spread out of Africa and across Asia, they met and interbred with these archaic cousins. The settlement of the vast Pacific Ocean is another epic tale of migration written in DNA, showing how brave seafarers traveled from island to island, carrying their genes with them. Even in places with famous ancient civilizations, the story is one of change. A study of people who lived in Rome during the imperial era showed that they were not primarily descended from the early Latins of Italy. Instead, their DNA revealed that a huge portion of the city's population had ancestry from Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, and the Near East. The mighty Roman Empire was a genetic melting pot, drawing people from all over its vast territory. Time and time again, from Africa to Europe to Asia, the DNA confirms it. We are all wanderers. Imagine a world where you were not the only kind of human walking the earth. Go back just 70,000 years and that was the reality. Our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, shared the planet with several other types of archaic humans. These were not apes. They were our close relatives, with their own cultures, tools, and intelligence. The most famous of these are the Neanderthals, who lived in Europe and Western Asia. In Asia, there were the mysterious Denisovans, a group we know about almost entirely from a few tiny bone fragments and the DNA they contained. These were our human cousins. For a long time, scientists debated what happened when our ancestors met these other humans. Did they fight? Did they ignore each other, or did they see each other as potential partners? The ancient DNA revolution has given us a stunning answer. They interbred, they had children together, and the DNA of those children was passed down through countless generations. The result is that these ancient, extinct human groups are not entirely gone. A part of them lives on inside many of us today, like genetic ghosts in our cells. If your ancestry is from anywhere outside of sub-Saharan Africa, you almost certainly carry a small amount of Neanderthal DNA, about 2% of your genome. This means that somewhere in your family tree, thousands of years ago, a modern human and a Neanderthal had a child. Even more surprising, Neanderthal DNA has been found in East Asians, even though Neanderthals never lived in East Asia. This discovery is powerful proof of how much our ancestors moved around, carrying these mixed genes with them as they migrated across the continent. The story gets even more complex with the Denisovans. While most populations have little to no Denisovan DNA, it is found in significant amounts in people from East Asia, and is especially strong among the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Islands, like in Papua New Guinea. This tells us that our ancestors met and mixed with at least two different archaic human groups as they populated the world. These ancient encounters have left a lasting legacy, contributing genes that may have helped our ancestors adapt to new environments, affecting everything from our immune systems to how our bodies handle high altitudes. The history of Europe provides one of the most dramatic examples of how populations can be completely transformed by migration. If we could travel back 8,000 years, we would find a continent inhabited by small groups of hunter-gatherers. These were the original Europeans who had lived there since the end of the Ice Age, but their world was about to change forever. A new way of life, farming, was spreading from Anatolia, modern Turkey. With this new technology came new people. These first farmers moved into Europe, bringing their genes with them. For a while, the farmers and the hunter-gatherers lived side by side, but the DNA evidence shows that over time, the hunter-gatherer populations dwindled. The farmers, with their stable food supply, expanded and multiplied. Their DNA began to dominate the continent. This was the first major population replacement in European history. The genetic signature of those original hunter-gatherers became very rare. The people of Europe were now largely descended from these newcomers from the East. But the story doesn't end there. Another massive wave of migration was coming. Around 5,000 years ago, a powerful new group swept into Europe from the Great Plains of the Eurasian Steppe, north of the Black and Caspian Seas. We call these people the Yamnaya. They were pastoralists, riding horses and herding cattle, and they brought with them wheeled wagons, a new culture, and possibly the ancestor of most modern European languages, known as Proto-Indo-European. Their impact was enormous and swift. Within a few hundred years, their DNA had replaced a huge portion of the previous farmer DNA. The scale of this replacement is staggering. In what is now Germany, the Yamnaya migration contributed up to 75% of the ancestry. In Britain, the figure is even higher. A shocking 90% of the existing population's genes were replaced by the DNA of these steppe riders. The DNA tells an even more specific story in places like Spain and Portugal, where about 40% of the total ancestry came from the Yamnaya, but nearly 100% of the male Y chromosomes were replaced. This suggests a history where newcomer males had a massive reproductive advantage, a pattern of social inequality written directly into the genetic code. It might seem strange, but the vast genetic diversity of humanity is actually lower today than it was in the distant past. When we look around the world now, we see an incredible variety of faces, cultures, and languages. Yet, from a genetic standpoint, any two humans living today are remarkably similar. The differences between a person from Finland and a person from Nigeria are, genetically speaking, very small. But if we go back 70,000 years, the planet was home to human groups that were far more different from each other than anyone alive today. Back then, our species, Homo sapiens, was just one of at least 5 distinct human lineages. There were the Neanderthals in Europe, at least 2 different strains of Denisovans in Asia, and the tiny Homo floresiensis, nicknamed hobbits, on an Indonesian island. The genetic gulf between a modern human and a Neanderthal was enormous, far greater than the distance between any two modern populations. The tree of humanity once had many large, separate branches. Today, only one of those main branches, ours, has survived. So what happened to all that diversity? As our ancestors, the Homo sapiens, expanded out of Africa, they spread across the globe. They encountered these other human groups, and while we know they sometimes interbred, the larger story is one of replacement. The other branches of the human family tree withered and disappeared. Why this happened is one of the biggest questions in human evolution. Was it disease, climate change, competition for resources, or direct conflict? We don't know for sure, but the result was that our lineage was the only one left standing. This means that all 8 billion people on Earth today are the descendants of a relatively small group of Homo sapiens survivors. We are all part of that single successful branch. While we have mixed and migrated and created new combinations of genes, we are all drawing from the same limited ancestral gene pool. The great diversity of the ancient human world is gone. We are a single, globalized species. And even now, our evolution hasn't stopped. Recent studies show natural selection has sped up in the last 5,000 years, especially in Europe, with hundreds of genetic changes related to immunity and metabolism rapidly spreading. Our story is still being written. The stories we tell ourselves about our past are powerful. They shape our identities, our politics, and how we see our place in the world. For centuries, many of these stories have been built on the idea of purity, of distinct races, pure bloodlines, and ancient, unchanging homelands. But the revolution in ancient DNA has taken a flashlight to these old myths, and what it reveals is a completely different picture. As David Reich puts it, people's stories about their history are almost always wrong. The science of our own genes is teaching us a lesson in humility. The evidence is overwhelming. There are no pure populations. Every person, every group is a mixture of other groups that came before. Your DNA is a tapestry woven from the threads of countless ancestors who walked, sailed, and rode across the globe. It contains the echoes of hunter-gatherers, the legacy of the first farmers, the genes of steppe nomads, and even the faint whispers of our archaic cousins, the Neanderthals and Denisovans. To claim a pure heritage is to ignore the beautiful, complex reality of our shared biological story. We are all mongrels, and that is a fundamental truth of our species. This new understanding of our past doesn't erase our cultural identities, but it does place them in a new context. It shows us that the ground beneath our feet was once home to entirely different peoples, and that our own ancestors were once the newcomers, the immigrants, the strangers in a strange land. It forces us to see history not as a set of static lines dividing us, but as a fluid, flowing river of humanity that connects us all. The genetic data provides a kind of objective truth that transcends politics and national borders. In the end, the greatest story that DNA tells is that we are one family. We are a single species that arose in Africa and went on a remarkable journey to populate every corner of the planet. Along the way, we changed, we adapted, and we mixed. We are all products of this long and tangled history of movement and connection. The differences between us are recent and shallow. Our shared ancestry is ancient and deep. As we continue to decode the epic story written in our genomes, we are not just learning about the past, we are discovering the profound and undeniable truth of our shared humanity.